Chris Carter here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We're going to be joined by Brian Batko, and we're going to talk about the Brandon Aiyuk potential trade that has been on everyone's minds all week long. There's a lot going into this. How involved are the Steelers really in talks? You'll get both of our thoughts on that, as well as our first look at the Steelers depth chart here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We're Chris Carter and Brian Batko. Brian, one of our great Steelers beat writers here, and we're going to be bringing to you all the Steelers talk that you can handle today, because there's a lot of stuff to break down, especially on the potential trade front with Brandon Aiyuk. We'll be getting into all of that, but as always, this show is you'll be finding the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all the Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as all the daily content that comes out from our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And as always, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, they've got 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. They have amazing food. They're an amazing place. Go check them out. We'll have more on them later. Brian, it seems like it never ends. The Brandon Aiyuk talk has been going on really since March. The potential of the Steelers trading for him being on the market. I know to some it can be exhausting, but as the talks continue to quote unquote heat up, or at least the rumors of the talks continue to heat up, how serious do you think the Steelers are as players in and actually having a chance to get Brandon Aiyuk at this point?
Yeah, Chris, I mean, I think they're serious players. I mean, we've known since he went on, the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark, and
right.
Flat out said on the record, if he's not in San Francisco next year, his top two teams he'd want to go to play for next would be Washington or Pittsburgh. So, I mean, we know where he wants to be. He's made that pretty clear. I don't think any of the new reporting from various sources Tuesday or Monday night really shed any additional light on that. If Cleveland or New England were on that short list for him, he would have said it on that show. So in that sense, I mean, we've kind of been in that mode. And I think as far as the Steelers, I've heard they have been interest. There has been interest, probably going back to the draft or earlier. Omar Khan has said he's always in talks with the other 31 GMs. You don't have to really go out on a limb to guess what he'd be talking to the Niners about, considering they have a Pro Bowl caliber receiver who is at an impasse with his contract with them. So I think, every smart team that has even a minuscule need at wide receiver would owe it to themselves to look into this. It seems like it's been distilled down to the Steelers, Browns, Patriots as the most serious contenders. You never know. The NFL's had some wild deals in recent years. Maybe somebody will swoop in out of nowhere who's not on the radar. There's probably a lot of smoke screens getting put up, a lot of misdirection via the media. But I think all it really comes down to is what we've been saying for months on this front. Omar Khan is not afraid to be aggressive, but he's not going to be foolish and get duped in a deal by anybody, even a front office as strong as San Francisco's is with John Lynch as their GM. They make a lot of shrewd moves, but Omar's going to be patient. I think he's going to be calculating. He's going to be analytical in all of this. And I'd say one of his strengths so far since taking over this role from Kevin Colbert, he seems to get some pretty good deals for himself and the Steelers, at least on paper.
And literally, as we're recording this late Tuesday evening before Wednesday's practice, Adam Schefter reports that the Patriots have decided not to explore any further trade possibilities with the 49ers regarding Brandon Aiyuk. So maybe the Patriots, out of that consideration now, another team the Steelers might not have to contend with here. Brian,
but they haven't been said to be out before. So I mean, all of this is very fluid. The Steelers were reportedly out. And then, yes, you had Schefter saying they re-engaged. That was the big word of the day Tuesday, re-engaged trade talks. And again, that's probably Omar Khan picking up the phone when it rings. And I imagine it's a lot of, you know where we stand. You know where we've stood for a while. We have this value on this player. Let us know if that works for you.
And see, that's where I'm at, Brian, is that I really think this whole thing, people are saying, oh, the Steelers have to come with a better offer. I think Omar Khan is sitting there saying, no, this is what we said we'd give. This is what you'll take if you want to give it up. If not, the Steelers will move on. And you and I have talked about this. I'm not 100% sure that, just getting, Brandon Aiyuk makes this team a Super Bowl contender. And if you get Brandon Aiyuk, all the financial things that have to come with it, because he's probably making at least $30 million a year with the Steelers moving forward, and what that might do to its future salary caps concerns when they got to sign Pat Freiermuth, George Pickens, re-sign TJ Watt, and a number of other things on top of keeping one of these two quarterbacks, whoever they want to think should be around long term. So, and that's not to say that they shouldn't do it, but these are serious considerations to have there. And if I'm the Steelers, I'm thinking like, you know what? I'm not trying to give up major draft capital or major capital period to get this guy when I'm going to have to pay major salary cap on top of that to keep him after that. So if I'm the Steelers in this situation, I feel like the smart move is to stay pat. And if someone wants to leap and go get him, go ahead, have fun, leap and go get him. And I think that's where the Niners, they're trying to play this game where they're trying to wait out the Steelers. They're trying to say, hey, maybe we'll get them to blink. Maybe they'll jump up, and then they'll have that make it happen. But I also have to think, if I'm the Niners, at some point I might say, you know what? We'll pay Brandon Aiyuk for a year. Brandon, play for a year. Next year, you'll be on the open market. You'll make whatever you want from wherever you want. But this is a team that's been on the verge of winning a Super Bowl for some time now. And they need to strike now, which is another reason I think that maybe they want to be looking at some of these other teams, including the Browns, because if they can get an Amari Cooper or someone else that can contribute to them right now versus a draft pick from the Steelers that won't help them win right now, that might be a better look in the eyes of GM John Lynch.
Yeah, but here's the flip side of that, though, Chris, and I understand that argument, but I mean, we've seen the Niners make some, kind of wild and crazy moves over these last few years, whether it was the Trey Lance deal or, Christian McCaffrey. So I wouldn't put it past them to take a pick right now if they feel like that's the best resource they can get back from, yes, let's say the Steelers in this case, because that's who we care about. That's who we talk about every day. Take a high pick, and then you flip that to somebody else for a player that can help you in 2024. I mean, it is only August 7th as we're recording this, and things do happen fast in the NFL, but things also happen slowly sometimes in the NFL. So I think that's where people on the outside, the fans, get kind of all up in arms about, why isn't this happening yet? When's it going to get done? Why hasn't it gotten done? There have probably been stops and starts in these conversations where it's like, all right, we're going to think about this offer. We're now, for the Niners, we got to go back, talk to Brandon Aiyuk and his camp, see how far apart we are again, maybe, or at least how real is this possibility that he's just going to keep holding out and drive that hard of a bargain for us. And the longer this goes on, we're losing developmental time with our team or somebody else that we could, get in here if we need to. So those are all considerations for the Niners. I mean, it's going to be very, very intriguing to see where this ends up. I think back to some of the high profile player sagas in recent years in the NFL, and, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, one that stands out to me for sure. I think, right up there with San Francisco and the Steelers as some of the best front offices in the NFL at the moment. That one seemed like there was no putting the toothpaste back in the tube with Lamar, and it was over and it was done. He wasn't going to be in purple anymore.
And then all of a sudden,
they come back to the table and they sing Kumbaya and make good. I think it's less likely that's going to happen with Aiyuk because he's not a quarterback. He's not Lamar, but teams can have a way of, not showing their full hand to a player until they need to, or vice versa. I don't think there's probably been a Steelers trade rumor tornado quite like this one in a while.
It's been pretty wild. We'll keep you up to date with all of that at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. We still got a lot more to break down here on the North Shore Drive podcast, including the first official depth chart of the season. We'll go over all sides of that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. And I am not speaking hyperbole. I'm not exaggerating. It is the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. Why? They have over 500 different available beer. That's right. 500 available beers. Over 300 of them are from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap all day, every day. And when you go there, they're always switching new ones in and out so that you can always find new things to try that are from around the area so you can learn what are the best beer options in the city. Plus, they have amazing food like Steak on a Stone, where you can get your choice cut of steak brought to you on a heated stone. Every time you cut up a piece, just press it into the stone and you choose how well done you want every single bite. All in a place that has an amazing sports atmosphere right across the street from PNC Park. Great for before, during, after Pirates games. Great to watch the Olympics. Great to watch anything that's going on, as they have over 20 televisions. It's Mike Beer Bar, the best bar in Pittsburgh. Go there today. When you get there, tell them Chris sent you. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast, Chris Carter, Brian Batko, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Brian, let's take a look at this Steelers depth chart. I want to start on the offensive side of the ball. I feel like there was a lot of chalk in this depth chart. Not much surprises, but as there shouldn't be. It's the first depth chart of the season. There's not going to be too much shakeups here. Just for everyone, just so they can hear it as they're listening to this, as they're going through the show. Your starters on the offensive line: Dan Moore, left tackle starter; Isaac Seumalo, left guard; Nate Herbig at center; James Daniels, right guard; Broderick Jones, right tackle; Pat Frymuth, your top tight end; Najee Harris, your top running back; Russell Wilson, your top quarterback. Fullback is Connor Hayward, not Jack Coletto. We'll get into that. Your top receivers: George Pickens, Van Jefferson, and Calvin Austin, all three listed as starters in this offense. Now, all that being said here, Brian, I thought there were a couple interesting things. Troy Fautanu listed the second left tackle, but anyone who sees that, I think that is just a formality. It's probably like he's probably the first tackle off the bench. Whoever gets hurt, and they'll try to find a way to make it work. We saw Troy Fautanu playing first team right tackle with Broderick Jones on the left for the first time, really, for an extended period on Tuesday at practice here. But is there anything else that stands out to you about this offensive depth chart here, Brian, that either could change or kind of make something that you're putting a pin in for now?
Not really. I mean, I think a lot of the times these depth charts, especially in August, I mean, they're not even worth the paper that they're printed on, or in this case, who even prints out a depth chart anymore? They're not even worth the tab that you open on your phone to look at it. I mean, again, like as you mentioned there, Chris, I mean, for all practicality's sake, Troy Fautanu is the backup at right tackle at the moment. And if you wanted to do a depth chart that is the essence of what's going on, he'd be the top backup at both tackle spots, probably, or you'd put Broderick Jones as the top backup to Dan Moore at left tackle. So, I mean, that kind of stuff doesn't really make a ton of sense. I mean, you've got Cordero Patterson listed here at running back, even though he hasn't done anything in camp on that NFI list. But, you don't have a guy like Cam Sutton listed on defense, I believe, because he's suspended. So, a lot of it is just sort of, or he's listed, but he's third team behind Beanie Bishop and Graylin Arnold, I assume, because he's going to be out for the first 8 games of the season. So, I mean, a lot of these are just, it's kind of what you're seeing in real life, but kind of not, because we know it wouldn't be that simple if you had a game tomorrow and you'd have to you'd have to navigate where these guys are going on the depth chart.
We talked with Ray about his 53-man roster projection earlier this week on the Monday episode of the North Shore Drive podcast. But Brian, looking at the offensive line, obviously keeping, certain guys like the starting 5 right now: Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier, and Mason McCormick, because he was a draft pick and a rookie here. But you're looking at how the Steelers want to assemble this crew. Who else are you keeping on this offense the way that this depth chart look? Spencer Anderson's your number 2 left guard. Dylan Cook listed as your number 2 right tackle here. Is it simply as just the first and second teams on this depth chart and you move forward, or is there something else that we could be missing?
No, I think it's pretty much the first and second team, and I would say minus Dylan Cook. I think it's probably him and Spencer Anderson fighting it out for that ninth and final O-line spot, and that Anderson's versatility will help him there. Dan Moore is still, I think, has some value as his ability to play left tackle. You're working Troy Fautanu so much on the right side that you're going to have to kind of keep all three of those, obviously, no matter what happens. We know they wouldn't get rid of one of the first rounders, but I'm sure there are people out there thinking if Dan Moore is not starting, does he make the team? I think he still would. So, I think that will play out, and knock on wood, there are no injuries. My biggest takeaway with the offensive depth chart, Chris, if I were Matt Sokol or Aaron Shamplin, and I'm listed as a fifth stringer here, they're the only two guys listed as fifth string on the whole roster, I think I'd walk into my position coach's office tomorrow and be like, what the heck, man? Fifth string? You couldn't have just fit me in with one of these other guys on the fourth string? Do I really need to be singled out here as a fifth stringer? What are we doing? I'm working my butt off. I'm taking advantage of every opportunity you give me, and I'm in the fifth string. This is ridiculous.
It is. It does seem like a very harsh thing. Like, buddy, this is how far out that you're being positioned, right?
You know what the response would be from the position coach or Mike Tomlin or whoever? It'd be like, bro, we care so little right now about the guys fourth and fifth string. We just ran out of space, and it's pretty much
names out of a hat.
Yeah, we just all your names are bunched up at the end. Sorry, man.
But that's kind of what it is. It's kind of when people ask me, what do I think of Dyson Edwards? I think that Dyson Edwards is not going to make the team. That's if he'll be happy to make the practice squad right now. That's what I really think of those situations. And again, it's not to minimize the effort that these guys put in, because we talk about these guys. Oh, they're fourth and fifth stringers. They're still amazing athletes. These are guys that busted their whole butts. These are the best of the best of the best to get to the NFL. Period. And that deserves it. But when if we're giving you real analysis of how depth chart is eventually going to play out, those guys aren't going to be on it in a couple
weeks.
I
wanted to get really into the weeds, and I guess I do, I feel like Jonathan Ward has been running ahead of LaMichael Pirine, and yet you've got Pirine listed as a third stringer, Jonathan Ward as a fourth stringer. But in all seriousness, as we kind of start keeping our eye on that first preseason game, I think Ward is somebody who could have a really strong preseason with the Steelers. He looks fast. You can see why he's been on several NFL teams despite going undrafted in 2020. He's really productive in college at Central Michigan. Looks like a guy who's still got some juice, and he could pile up the yardage now in the preseason. And if a guy like Cordero Patterson is not able to get that hammy right by the regular season, maybe Ward is your third running back in this equation.
Maybe. And I think Cordero Patterson was my guy going into training camp, but we haven't seen him. So yeah, that's certainly a very interesting thing to look at there. I want to flip over to defense. We'll do that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko answering all things there. But first, I want to remind you that this show is brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They are your mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That is Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda. You can find Moon Township Honda at 5802 University Boulevard, Moon Township, Pennsylvania, or on their website, moonhonda.com. Now for a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
To build the Honda CR-V Hybrid, we took everything you love about the CR-V and kicked it up a notch with greater power for a CR-V unlike any before. Adventure confidently with Honda, car and driver's most awarded brand in 10 best history. The CR-V and CR-V Hybrid, part of the Honda line of rugged vehicles. Visit your local Honda dealer where new vehicles are arriving daily. Buy online or reserve from select Honda dealers.
We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko breaking all things down here. We switched to the defensive side to look at the Steelers depth chart, at least the first proposed depth chart of the season from the team here. Again, a lot of chalk, a lot of expectations being met here. But a few things that I thought were very interesting among the starters. Keanu Benton solidifying himself as the nose tackle on the starters on the defensive line. I thought that was significant. But the other thing here, and I think this is very rare, Brian, I want to ask if you think you've seen this in your time covering the Steelers, an undrafted rookie free agent is the starter on a depth chart, and that's Beanie Bishop, of course, at slot corner, at nickelback. Now, again, this is, this could be partially impacted by the fact Cameron Sutton's listed third team, and he would, maybe he would be that starter if he wasn't, about to be suspended for the first, 8 games of the season. But looking at this depth chart, Brian, can you think back to a time where an undrafted free agent, and we know Mike Hilton, but Mike Hilton wasn't that right away. He earned his way into it. Beanie Bishop's kind of been this guy in training camp from start to finish.
And Hilton was with, I think, the Jaguars first, even before the Steelers.
Yeah.
So it's not like he was a priority free agent signing in Pittsburgh. Yeah, this is pretty unprecedented, I think, for Beanie Bishop. Clearly, they like him. We keep getting more and more signs of that being the case. This depth chart, yet another one. But it's just reflecting what we're seeing in real life out there on the field. He's somebody who, if he didn't play well early on, could have easily started ceding some of those reps to guys with more NFL chops like Grayland Arnold, Thomas Graham Jr., both of whom have made plays at times. The Cam Sutton thing is interesting because, and I'll tell you why I think Cam Sutton's usage or lack thereof is another signal of the confidence they have in Beanie Bishop. It's not that they're just not using Cam Sutton at all in team periods. They are at times, but it's usually at safety. So it sort of makes me think, they are liking what they're seeing so much from Beanie Bishop that they're sort of making peace with the idea of him being the guy all season and holding down that nickel corner spot as a rookie. And when Sutton is available to them again, maybe they'll be toying around with him more as a safety sub-package guy, as opposed to, all right, Beanie, get out of the way. Time for me to get the job back. This is months down the line to figure that out. But yeah, I mean, it's just, more early indications of Bishop playing well, taking to this role, even as an undrafted rookie. But we've said on the show before, helps when you're a 24-year-old undrafted rookie who's played a lot of ball, 6 seasons in college and thrived last year at West Virginia. You have the production to back it up. You have the 40 time and everything that you want to see. Just older guy, smaller guy, but that doesn't seem to be preventing him from making a really strong first impression with the Steelers.
I think it's been very encouraging to see how he's taken it on, and he's not run away from challenges either. He's been right up in the face of the first team. He's been taking on receivers left and right, and he's gotten beat, but he's also bounced back from getting beat. And I think that's been really important too. Is sometimes rookies can play well, but when they hit that first sign of adversity or they're knocked on their butt, how do they get back up from that? Not everyone gets back up from it well. I think Beanie Bishop has at times, and that's the kind of tenacity you want to see from especially a slot corner who's going to be tasked with a lot of dirty jobs throughout the season. Just the nature of the position itself. Let's look around the defensive depth chart a little bit here. Defensive line. Are there any surprises that you have here? DeMarvin Leal, second team. He's a guy that was getting healthily scratched last year while guys like Loudermilk were still on the roster. Does that or anything else of this defensive line surprise you or raise your eyebrow at all?
No, but it does appear to be for the whole front seven, really, it's a depth chart of maybe where guys would be working in practice if everyone were healthy, because you see Dean Lowry on here as a second team defensive end. He's been on the PUP list since training camp started. I guess this is telling us that if he were healthy or once he gets healthy, he's going to slot in with the second group. But at least for right now, we haven't seen him. We haven't seen what he's able to do. It's providing more opportunities for Isaiah Loudermilk, who, if you want to sort of pick nits, not great for him to be a third teamer at this stage of his career. And I think all of us who've done any sort of roster analysis or projections pieces, he's on the bubble. He's very much on the fringe. I think he's going to end up being on the wrong side, but We'll see. Obviously, Lowry being injured could certainly help Loudermilk, at least in the early part of the season, to get on that 53. And another guy that I just want to mention, not on the D line, but again in that front seven at inside linebacker, Cole Holcomb, and third teamer. I mean, almost seems kind of randomly thrown in there. We haven't even seen him in the probe. I mean, not only is he still recovering from that significant leg injury sustained last season, but he also just had his first kid. So probably a lot going on in Cole Holcomb's world. He was around the team throughout OTAs and minicamp. But yeah, I mean, I didn't even expect him to be on this depth chart, but maybe if he does manage to get back to the field, put him behind Peyton Wilson, Tyler Matakevich, because could be a while for him to get back up to speed. And that's sort of where they would start him out in theory, if he's able to do that.
Yeah, I think it's going to certainly, be interesting to see how that impacts, because you know what, I've been very impressed by the Steelers linebackers, and I mean, I guess you should be, because Patrick Queen is Patrick Queen, and he's supposed to play really well. Elandon Roberts, we knew what he was coming in last year, but Peyton Wilson has lived up to the hype, I think, of what they drafted him to be, and he's shown as a guy that, like, if one of those starters goes down, you don't want him to go down, and Patrick Queen certainly, is the guy you want to be the star of this group. But I think Peyton Wilson is the guy that you throw in there, and you'd be pretty excited to throw in there. Peyton Wilson might end up being like the best backup linebacker we've seen for the Steelers in many years, and I think that this might be the best linebacking group that we've seen in many years. And if Cole Holcomb can eventually get healthy, it might be the best inside linebacker group that we've seen for the Steelers.
Robert Spillane's going to see this, Chris, and he's going to hunt you down. He's going to put you in the dirt. All right, just sleep with one eye open. Just sleep with one eye open if Robert Spillane catches wind of what you just said on the North Shore Drive podcast.
Hey, listen, I'll have Peyton Wilson defending me, and there'll be about a height of difference there in doing so.
That would be a backers on backers drill that I would want to see. Robert Spillane versus Peyton Wilson.
I wanted to go over this with you here because the front seven, like you said, kind of is solidified there. What's the assortment of how you think they should take the secondary? Should it be 5 corners and 5 safeties, more like 6 corners, 4 safeties? We've seen Ryan Watts fit in at safety, and I think look pretty good for a rookie that's transitioned to that spot and for his first NFL camp. But we know that corner is very important, and needing to have guys that can fill in both in the slot and the outside is certainly a thing there. How do you expect this to play out with the Steelers and who they keep in the secondary?
Yeah, I think versatility is going to be key. It always is. There's going to be difficult decisions to make on that back end. Like you said, there always are, because you've got to factor in, how many hats can you wear? Somebody like Ryan Watts is, mainly a safety at this point, but he's got the corner background. Cam Sutton can do it all. We know that, but he's not going to be on the 53 coming out of camp. So that's going to open a spot for somebody else. Do you want someone who's more of a specialist? Or do you want somebody who's more of a, inside outside guy like a Thomas Graham, who's listed as a 4th stringer here, but we know he's playing more than that in practice. Even Anthony Averett, a veteran who I think he's looked pretty good thus far in training camp. Not sure if there's going to be a spot for him, because guys like Miles Killebrew are going to be around for special teams.
Yep.
And I'm just really curious to see, Chris, as far as the depth chart goes, whether it's offense or defense. I think after this first preseason game, the position where you might see the most shuffling, depending on how guys play, who stands out, who might get toasted, is in that secondary, whether it's especially corner, because you've got some vets mixed in with some young guys. You've got the outside corners. You've got the nickel corners. It's going to be really big Friday night against the Texans for everybody for sorting out the pecking order in that group.
I certainly think there's a lot to play out here. We'll keep you up to date with all of that as training camp continues today and tomorrow. But then the first preseason game of the year is Friday. We'll have our full team assembled at Acrisure Stadium covering that. Get all that coverage all week long at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find us here on the North Shore Drive podcast every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of those episodes and the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We'll see you again Friday. I'll have Jerry Dulac on, getting you ready for some preseason football here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.